Sergio, don't forget the brakes, short, chubby woman gently, then about in the sprouted bristled cheek of the missus and put a package from the container into his hands. Don't sit there hungry. Understood, 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 the man grumbled good-naturedly and kissed the woman back. Came out the door. Morning the roads were habitually empty, pavement and deserted. Actually, so early in their little town they were still sleeping and dreaming. Sergio turned up the sound of the radio and, singing softly, drove the car to the exit of the city. Behind there are 5-story buildings, cozy private sector. For the windows of the dark wall stretched the forest. Unwrapped in a cover of snow, suddenly something flashed. Sergio automatically hit the brakes. The car twisted on an empty road, but the man still managed to control and leveled the car. Sergio abruptly opened the door and jumped out of the car to the side of the road. A pity-veiled figure. You lost her mind, shouted Sergio. Where throw yourself under the wheels. I wanted to get back in the car and continue on my way, but something bothered him. Like an inner voice whisper, wait. Sergio headed for the intruder. He caught up with her and grabbed her by the hand. Before him, lowered his head, a woman was standing, whose age was completely impossible to determine at a glance. Face swollen and shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. Eyes swam, lips swollen. Legs of a stranger. Sergio saw some movement. He lowered his eyes that is the floors of women's coats, and cuddling up to her leg, on the snow stood a tiny boy of 3 years old. He scowled at the man and sniffled. Now this is serious. Sergio looked around. Road was all the same post. What you happened? Who beat you this? Your baby? Dina calmed to unstick her clotted lips. But I couldn't say anything. Sergio managed to grab the woman by the arms in time, as it suddenly began to settle on the road. Men dragged the unfortunate woman to the car and put her in the back seat. The animal darted there and immediately burrowed, the folds of a woman's clothes becoming almost invisible. Sergio got behind the wheel and turned the car around. He quickly made his way back and stopped at the house. Windows shone, means Glade went to bed. He ran inside. TYRAN, I can't explain anything, not understanding myself, what's happening, but I have to go to work. You sorry that falls on you, but I see no other way, a man said in a shrill voice, simultaneously holding out a sheepskin coat to his wife and nodding at the door. Sergio, without asking questions, followed her husband. Looking in an open car door, she instantly assessed the situation and quietly asked, You beat no, well, what are you? She rushed under the wheels from the forest. The car skidded, but I definitely didn't hit it. I don't know what happened to her, but obviously something is wrong. She was beaten to a pulp. Yes, with her a very small boy. He looked pleadingly at his wife. Let's pull out and drive her, I'll figure it out here. Sergio looked at the cars again, affectionately called, Hello, baby, let's go, I will drink tea for you. You know how delicious tea is, a sweet cheesecake for him. Do you like cheesecake? She reached out her hand, and the boy suddenly obediently crawled out of his hiding place, carefully putting a small hand in the palm of Samuel. A mom will come with us too. Her uncle Sergio helped her. Sergio pulled the stranger slowly coming to his senses out of the car, carried her in his arms through the open door, laid on the couch, and walked away. Ride, Paige will, we can handle it ourselves. Sergio waved her hand to her husband and cooed something to the boy. Sergio, desperately speeding, until raced finally to work. At the cemetery gates, the employees of the Funeral Services Bureau were no longer satisfied. Sergio, night from the word you, there are 3 of us today. You're late, the funeral director groaned in a high voice. I was not late, arrived exactly on time, muttered Sergio, opening the gate. Used to show up earlier, now how you should perceive. Day flew by unnoticed. Usually there was no such load on their churchyard, but today, literally, there was an emergency. For the last 4 years after retiring, he worked as a cemetery caretaker. Former military, he, finally, a cell here, in native lands, enjoys well-deserved peace and provincial life. Finally all the deeds have been done, funeral service staff went home, and Sergio looked anxiously at his watch and dialed his wife's number. Sergio, we are fine. Not letting him utter a word, Samuel started right away. Log into the pharmacy and to the store. List I will drop you right now. I am all busy. I am waiting for a house. Love kiss. Sergio smiled into the silenced receiver and went to fulfill his wife's order. Arriving, the men quietly entered the guest room. Intact, reclining with a stranger, talking softly about something. Samuel boy. Fun dice game. Everyone hello. Sergio, I tried not to raise my voice, not to scare uninvited guests, but the woman still shuddered. Scared put his head on his shoulders. Sergio soothingly stroked her hand on the table and gestured for her husband to follow her. My kitchen spouse hugged Sergio, all brought on the list. Thank you, my good. Very sad story with our foundling, my page. Sergio began unpacking shopping bags. Having dinner and finally feeding the child, the couple sat comfortably at the kitchen table. Alice refused to eat, she felt too bad. That's why Sergio got drunk, weaned, and put to bed. But Sergio, some kind of horror, listen. Alice grew up in an orphanage. When the girl turned 18, she received a small apartment from the state and ended up completely alone in an orphanage. Friends she didn't have, the girl was too different from her peers. She loved to read, studied well, also loved to draw. Her not interested in intrigue and gossip boys, who pinned other girls in the corners, and other joys of teenage life. Looking around on free bread, Alice decided to go to school. She passed the exams and entered the art school. Finally she could fully devote herself to her main and favorite pastime, what brought her joy and inspiration. Work Alice were easy, some transparency and purity of colors. Teachers invariably sent pictures of the girl at the exhibition, so by the end of your studies Alice accumulated a solid portfolio with awards and diplomas. Last year Alice, together with several workers, and sent to the regional center for the next exhibition. There a decent-looking man became interested in her paintings. He looked with surprise at the delicate graceful lines and pierced by the light of form. Which incredible beauty! Who author? He asked the curator. Here gladly pointed to Alice. By his opinion, the girl deserved it, to get noticed. Interested man approached Lise and expressed his admiration. So the girl met her future husband. Louis was very funny, well-read and gallant. Men had his own successful business, network of car repair shops. Novel developed rapidly. Louis surrounded the unaccustomed to such attention. Alice cared. Every day I met a girl after school and escorted home, telling funny stories along the way. Calling Ainlai's fit of uncontrollable laughter, he didn't try to get her into bed. Even their first kiss happened only a month after they met. Girlfriends Alice from the school only envious sighs. Which man? Hold on for him, Eliskea, this is a chance. All what happened seemed like a fairy tale, in which the role of the prince unconditionally belonged to Louise. Flowers, romantic dates, tender declarations of love, finally, an offer of marriage. Alice, of course, said to. Preparation for the wedding was completely in the hands of the groom. Even he chose the dress for his future wife himself. Alice awkwardly twirling in front of the mirror, wrapped in a tight corset, legs tangled fluffy skirt, and the edge of the bodice embroidered with small stones mercilessly rubbed the delicate skin. But don't know, Louise, she is terribly uncomfortable and also kind of pompous. Maybe it is better to take something in the Greek style, simple and elegant. Bunny, my favorite, you don't understand yet, but the wedding is with you. Status on this dress from an expensive fashion designer. All must know that for my woman I choose only the most prestigious and the best. Alice winced. And I'm fine in artistic perception, literally moaning from the vulgarity of the outfit, but I didn't want to offend my loved one. Think, wear a dress once, and then for Will. Wedding was just fabulous. Groom and the bride looked amazing. He is tall, broad-shouldered, with a white smile, and she is fragile, almost weightless, in a magnificent dress, similar to meringue cakes. Guests pronounce it, wishing young happy family life, shouted bitterly, and gave solid envelopes with money. To cheekbones Alice drove from the constant glued smile, feet ached, and the body since the day she was looking forward to, when they are alone. Louis carried his new wife in his arms to their suite, carefully placed the girl on the floor, then she turned her back on him and asked for help to plunder the corset. Maybe it was the last happy moment of Alice's life. Next second she got a rough kick and fell humiliating bars, that is, the uncomfortable folds of a voluminous dress. Finally, having returned, the girl looked at her husband in surprise. She did not understand yet what happened. Louis looked at his wife with disgust. You behaved horribly. Holes spent the evening with a sour face, as if you were forced to marry. On weddings were all my partner's future customers. Already you could contain yourself, don't show everyone that she married me just for the money. Men approached Alice and jerked up you on your feet. Young woman looked with horror at the distorted anger of her beloved face. All her life, like a runaway car, flew into the abyss. She didn't understand what happens to your loved one. Here he throws her against the wall with hatred and spits out poisonous, insulting phrases. And here he is the next day hugging her legs asking for forgiveness for that flared up. These endless swings from love-hate, from aggression, tenderness and demolitions and worries, just morally destroyed Alice. Louis did not beat his wife in the truest sense of the word. He could push, shove, or angrily throw something towards Alice, but there was never direct violence. Alice, there was no mumbling and unanswered rag, but in the face of completely illogical behavior Louisa, she got lost. Never could not have predicted what will cause his outburst of anger, that this flash will pour out one day. In the period of another honeycomb, the spouses enjoyed a summer evening in a small coffee shop. Waiter brought the order and placed before Stature a cup of espresso, but on the contrary Alice placed a large transparent glass slade and whipped cream and caramel pieces. Young woman smiled at the waiter and switched drinks. Lad and was intended for Louis, and from the press. Boy spread his hands with an embarrassed smile, confused and with a slight semi-bow left. Alice sipped my coffee, looked up at her husband and felt how her heart sank. Eyes Louisa literally blazed with rage. Finish your drink, your coffee, and let's go, ice tone, knife through teeth. The man didn't even touch his drink. Young woman shrunk internally. I wanted to run somewhere far away, anywhere, just stay away from here. But there was nowhere to run. Alice drank espresso in a few sips and doomedly got up from the table. When they went home, Alice, still hoping that Louis calmed down. Eventually, she didn't understand what was the reason for his bad mood this time. Alice unfastened the strap-on sandals and did not immediately notice what Louis was all over her. She bent over and froze, stumbling on the ring, the eyes of her husband. You, what do you allow yourself? He hissed and grabbed her by the hair, pulled his wife's head back. Do you think you can publicly humiliate me under more for my Alice? Tears splashed. Louis, let go, she asked. About what are you talking about? Which humiliation? Husband pushed Lisa away. She hit her head painfully and a shelf for keys. Iron sparks danced in the eyes. Through the girl's ringing in the ears, how Louise expresses her displeasure to her. Turns out, changing drinks in front of the waiter, she put her husband in a humiliating position. He saw how haughtily the waiter smiles, how he discusses it with colleagues, a lot. I ordered myself a drink, and the wife is some kind of strong ADP, but drinks. All it sounded so ridiculous and implausible. What? Alice suddenly laughed. Not cost, certainly, do it. Louis flew up to the wife sitting by the wall, going all out for his girl. Life laughter forests and broke off. She gasped for air. Pain was so strong, what seemed, now the soul leaves the body. And that evening the husband left, slammed the door. Alice stayed there, on the floor, curled up from hurts. Catching my breath, the girl gently unfolded. Left, holding on to the wall, runaway throbbing in my head. She made it to the bedroom, but I didn't have the strength. Young woman collapsed on the bed and collapsed. Heavy a dream. Awoke from sharp pain. Standing up out of bed, Alice saw a bloodstain there, where you just lay. The weakest, she dialed the ambulance with her fingers. In hospital found out that she is pregnant. Bleeding stopped. Despite for blunt abdominal trauma, fruit was saved. However, it was necessary to spend at least another week in the ward. Closer in the evening by the bed, Alice's husband appeared with a huge bouquet of flowers and packages, full of delicacies. He immediately agreed in the ward for his beloved wife, paid for his wife's 24-hour health monitoring, and charmed all the nurses. Alice exhausted watching this performance. When she was transferred to a new single room, and the spouses were left alone, the girl said in a lifeless voice, "I want a divorce." Louise, who put a bouquet in a vase, turned around in surprise. "Pregnant, my, what are you doing? Which divorce, sweet?" His lips stretched into a smile. "You will be babies soon. I'm the happiest person on earth, and you're just tired. Get some sleep." He gently kissed his wife on the forehead and went out the door. What happened yesterday again began to seem like a dream. Could this caring and loving man act so cruelly as his wife? Alice was surrounded by care and affection. Louis, as if he had expelled all the demons from the soul and completely dissolved in anticipation of the replenishment of the family from the hands. At home, he met his wife in a luxury limousine, decorated with balloons. All hospital residents gathered around to stare at a beautiful extract, and the elderly nurses brushed away tears. Necessary same, what a gold man. Caught at home with little Vanka, Alice plunged motherhood, but didn't get to enjoy it to the fullest. 100 watched her with maniacal attention. From his eyes did not hide not the slightest oversight, and for each Alice got a poke, swearing, or humiliation. The girl had almost no milk, so from the very first days it was necessary to introduce complementary foods. What means no milk? Eat special food, stretch, put it on more. You're just being lazy, and I will not let you feed the son of chemistry. Louise took away a jar of infant formula from a young mother and defiantly poured the contents into the toilet, which promptly crashed. In this, naturally, Alice was also to blame. To her, and had to deal with the consequences. To their 2 years Alice lived in hell. How did she describe it to herself? Husband no longer showed yours and aggression, but constantly caused her physical pain, pinched a little differently, poked a finger, could just walk up and pull out a few hairs on his head. Alice constantly walked in small bruises and abrasions. If you won't say, then beat. Here moral violence has become many times more. Louis ate out daily Alice's self-esteem. He put pressure on the most painful, got in the way, humiliated, performed, insulted. Young woman devised a tactic. She tried not to delve into the essence of her husband's words at all, silently nodded and complied with the requirements. At home, he met his wife in a luxury limousine, decorated with balloons. All hospital residents gathered around to stare at a beautiful extract, and the elderly nurses brushed away tears. Necessary same, what a gold man. Caught at home with little Vanka, Alice plunged motherhood, but didn't get to enjoy it to the fullest. 100 watched her with maniacal attention. From his eyes did not hide not the slightest oversight, and for each Alice got a poke, swearing, or humiliation. The girl had almost no milk, so from the very first days it was necessary to introduce complementary foods. What means no milk? Eat special food, stretch, put it on more. You're just being lazy, and I will not let you feed the son of chemistry. Louise took away a jar of infant formula from a young mother and defiantly poured the contents into the toilet, which promptly crashed. In this, naturally, Alice was also to blame. To her, and had to deal with the consequences. To their 2 years Alice lived in hell. How did she describe it to herself? Husband no longer showed yours and aggression, but constantly caused her physical pain, pinched a little differently, poked a finger, could just walk up and pull out a few hairs on his head. Alice constantly walked in small bruises and abrasions. If you won't say, then beat. Here moral violence has become many times more. Louis ate out daily Alice's self-esteem. He put pressure on the most painful, got in the way, humiliated, performed, insulted. Young woman devised a tactic. She tried not to delve into the essence of her husband's words at all, silently nodded and complied with the requirements. Louis, I cannot take it any more, I divorce you. Voice Alice sounded smooth and confident. She decided everything for herself. We can. Instant I was next to the girl. To the boyfriend I got myself. Hissed with a smile, no already, won't embarrass me, Understood? Under you will live like a plinth and crawl on your knees for a crust of bread. What it was further, Alice remembered badly. Husband beat her long and tastefully, she fainted several times, but vomited her water and continued. For a moment she thought that this was the end, but she heard a thin little voice and opened her eyes. I saw my son in a veil of tears, standing on the threshold of the room, and a man, who went to the child. Unclear where the forces came from. Alice jumped, grabbed a chair and brought it down on the hated head of Louise. Man collapsed like a wreck. Young woman, panting, ran up to Vanga, picked him up in her arms, and the bullets rushed to the door in the hallway. Got dressed fast, the case of the child and the department itself. How they made their way through snowdrifts and winter forest from behind a country house to the road, Alice didn't remember. Woke up only then, when Sergio started yelling at her. Here is such a story, Samuel concluded. Girls have nowhere to go, nowhere to wait for help, so the page will have to connect. That meant their own, please. What there with her hubby, a woman named a well-known surname in the city, suddenly she. A chair is still not a broom. Sergio nodded silently and picked up the phone. By 20 minutes he already knew that husband Fox is alive and relatively healthy, lying down with a slight concussion after being attacked by robbers, who stunned him and kidnapped his wife and son. Sergio, I sleep. Well, wow, which? Maine immediately came up with a fairy tale about robbers. Man thought about it, and how to proceed. South the street heard the creak of tires in the snow, headlights flickered in the window. Some seconds later there was a knock on the door. Sergio exchanged glances with Samuel, and, making a sign to her, went to the door. Who there? Volume asked, opening. Master, need to talk. Sergio opened the door and left, passing inside the high, waxed man in an expensive coat. Hallway filled with the scent of expensive perfume. Sergio urinated. Squeamish, asked unfriendly, what you wanted? Man chuckled, looked around the scene. Simple, clean. Rogue, do you understand? What's the matter? My faithful wife started an affair and decided to leave me for her lover. Yes, I also took my son. What happened there? Don't know. Like how he was not eager to accept her with a child from another man. In general, they had a fight, I even hit. She ran away and called me, while I'm out, until I arrived. In general, I couldn't find her. I understand, so, eating became bad, and you, Vanchik, picked up this already road camera. You just met her not far from the car registrar, explained Luis, answering the questioning look of Sergio. So here, thank you very much, I am ready to compensate you for the time and resources spent, but I understand, my wife needs professional medical help, so I wish I could pick up as soon as possible. Swam to the ache in the back of the head. I wanted to punch this dude right in the middle of his Hollywood smile, but the man resisted. You see, Lee, the thing is, that your wife has already gone to bed, however, and son, so you are welcome tomorrow and check the time, who is waiting for you. Case in, what Alice told a completely different version of events, and to figure it out, have to call law enforcement. Sergio's sweetest smile, eyes narrowed, an evil expression appeared on his face. My wife is out of her mind. I would not trust her words. Here tomorrow together with the police we will figure it out, dear. Now please forgive me, early to work tomorrow, it's time to sleep. You will regret, hissed Luis and ran out the door. Sergio, come here, called Sergio. Need to transport and Forest Senka, and we'll deal with this bastard. Now it needs to be received, hide. Sergio thought. So, and where we will not take even in this state, and taken to Jesus. Dates, what's in the snowdrifts, you will not reach such a distance. Bede waved her hand, picked up the phone again, and went into the next room. After talking, I returned, smiling slyly. But mother, wait for the guest, he will come. Samuel threw up her hands. I'll go pies and put. Closer by the morning, at the quietest time, a car drove up to the caretaker's house again. Sergio came out to meet, shook the driver's hand warmly, and patted him on the back. Ran out Sergio, kissed the arrived man in the crack overgrown with a beard and shoved a basket into his hands. Jesus, there are all kinds of pies, you will understand yourself. Tea, have a drink or just go. Ma'am, let's do it right now, the man answered. Go to hell as far as the sight of your fighters before we move. Sergio just kicked out of the house, Alice accompanied by Vanga, but from the block. Sergio crossed herself after the departing. Jesus, owner of a large forest farm, was the son of Sergio and Samuel. Father asked Jesus shelter a fugitive with her son, until the issue with her husband is resolved. Son, listening to Alice's story, immediately agreed. Sergio sighed. Let's wait for a pleasant visit to Luisa and solve everything. Closer by noon at Pavlin, phones started ringing. Called from the job. Vandals worked at the cemetery, several monuments were damaged. Arrived at the police station. Urgently required the presence of a caretaker. Sergio swore. But why now, Payne? Nobody, do not open. If this bastard comes, go through the woods and call the police. All understood, gave instructions to his wife Sergio, and rushed to work. Proceedings about vandalism were long and tedious, dragged on for a good 5 hours. By signing the latest protocol, Sergio finally went home. My heart was restless. Last hour he tried to get through to his wife, but she didn't pick up the phone. Driving up to the home area, Sergio pricked up. Heart boomed. From somewhere from the side of his house a column of black smoke rose into the sky. Man added speed. There was only one crossroad to the house. Cranking the steering wheel, Sergio involuntarily closed his eyes for a second, but immediately opened. The end of the street blazed them with Samuel's small house. A little way off, neighbors and onlookers gathered. The fire engine worked, but the ambulance did not stop. Sergio touched the car very slowly, auto-parked, climbed out, walked on stiff legs to the native fence. House almost extinguished, the roof has collapsed, only charred parts remain on the walls. Somebody from the neighbors noticed Sergio and walked up to him. Page, yes, God bless, you were looking for. The neighbor broke off and nodded as soon, thought you were there, inside. I say, he doesn't have a car. He speaks, at home he always has a day off on Mondays. What about Samuel? Exhaled Sergio, holding on to the heart. Where she neighbor batted his eyes, looked around, then suddenly remembered. So the hospital fields imported. The firemen have just arrived, immediately and taken out, giving soon. Hold on, let's get it. Greener neighbor, shouted to the side, doctor call, bad for a person. Later 2 weeks in a bright hospital ward went, and a bearded big man fax, like a man able to drag a bunk. I and you marvel turned to Jesus, smiled so that I won't do it, what won't you do? This didn't even have a heart attack, so, trivia. How fields are all right with babysits, fiddling with living creatures. Like this now we are waiting for you, when they are discharged. House Sergio and Samuel burned down almost to the ground. Wormwood, inhaling, and the smoke was saved by the fire department, and Sergio ended up in the same hospital with a heart attack. A woman quickly corrected, and 2 days later I was already discharged. Jesus took his mother. Now everyone was waiting, when Sergio would also be allowed to leave the hospital walls. A burnt-down house recently moved in by a new neighbor, installed a video surveillance system, including gate cameras. The footage provided to the police was clearly visible, how Luis's car drove up to the house, how the man first banged on the door and then he broke the glass and threw a bottle of gasoline on fire there. It is seen under the first one door by the goats standing in the yard. In general, everything was quite obvious. Sergio was discharged after a week. Jesus, I met my father and brought him to the forestry. On the way, the son told the man, what Luis is under investigation, what did he and his mother say? Alice filed a complaint against him for beatings and threats to life. Now this dude is unlikely to get away. From large carved, like joyful jumped out of the house Sergio and threw herself on her husband's neck. Following a beautiful young girl came out. Alice! Gasped Sergio. You learn, what a beauty you are. Alice blushed. Thank you to you, just bruises gone, that's why you think so. You excuse me, please? You have so many troubles because of me, not because of you, but because of your ex. Stop blaming yourself for everything. Let's go to the house, Jesus, who appeared at the door, butted into the conversation, holding in your hands a bathhouse stained with something sweet. All crowded inside. Sergio hesitated. She looked after her husband, son, and already become native Alice. Well, now I hope. A bad behind and waiting so good. Woman smiled and closed the door behind her.